So at school today, I was just thinking of, I felt like I wanted to make more TF2 YouTube videos. Uh, so I thought of this video idea, and it was best TF2 maps to live in. And I did a quick Google search, and I did not see any other people that had made this video. So I felt like, I could do it. And now, please do note that this is all my personal opinion, and this is not really ranked in any sort of uh, way that makes any sense. It's just like a list of maps that I would like to live in, and even though they are not really ranked that much, some rules I will be setting is it that they will be window one from Team Fortress 2, but like in real life. You will be able to interact with anything as you could in real life. You can open doors, break things, move objects, etc. Right? So it'll just be like a regular life. Now, you could be alone with friends or whoever you wish, so just like real life again. And in-game mechanics will work, like resupply lockers will magically heal you, replenish your hunger, whatever like that. And doors that could be only closed or opened by control points being capped would also work like that. So before we get into the main, top 5, I would like to lay off some honorable mentions. Just like barely got in, but just not enough, right? 2 Fort. It is definitely one of the 7 OG TF2 maps, and perhaps even the most known TF2 map, but it has a couple really big issues, right? For the pros, it does have a huge amount of space, biking around and whatnot, right? Even has 2 sides, pretty much identical, which would be pretty cool because that's just more space. But it does lack in looks and accessibility, for example, the sound of the river and the ensuing lead poisoning from drinking said river water, would be pretty annoying. And what will be even more annoying is having to walk all through the lower level, then the lower forts, then the courtyard, and then the stairs, and then, only then, could you get to the spawn room, where you can get the resupply cabinet, if you were hurt or stuff like that. That would be pretty annoying, but you can also just roleplay the average man versus machine pyro and just climb up directly. Second honorable mention, I think a pretty soothing map would be Sujin. At first, it seemed like it would be an amazing map where everything's just sunshine and rainbows, fun and awesome. But you gotta think about it for like even 5 seconds, and it becomes like pretty horrible. Not only is there like huge cliffs where you can just fall off, trip and die, which will probably not be the best. As for living, the map isn't all too big, right? So if you want to go around biking or skating or anything like that, it would be pretty much impossible unless you want to do it in the spawn room or like the flat area around the spawn room. But it does have water, whatever lake you want to call it, so you could swim in there. It will be pretty fun, but just the size of it does not allow it to be any higher. And now, for the last honorable mention, is Stage 3 of Harp. Although it's called Harp Stage 3, it will be pretty cool to live in, right? And specifically Stage 3, because in Stage 3, both, I think, the blue spawn, the first blue spawn, and the last red spawn are like fully encompassed by like rooms, so it couldn't even be that cold, right? They also have a huge amount of free space. I mean, the last point is huge, right? And they also have computers, which is something really cool because, most of current population cannot live without computers, right? But, Harp has computers, so, boredom would not really be a problem. Um, So now we can get into the main list. So I think, for number 5, I would like to put in Pierre, on some Playboy Cardi type shit. You know, it's kind of like, an island vacation, right? As most payload maps are, it's pretty big, right? There's multiple levels of elevation, right? There's tons of water for you to swim in, and it's pretty fun, right? You just wake up and you can see the ocean, right? And the layout it's really open, and also in the last red spawn, there's a basically what is a roller coaster, and also carnival games. So yeah, pretty fun. Now, as for number 4, I think enclosure is perfect. It's kind of like Jurassic Park, without the dinosaurs eating you, right? Jurassic Park, but the good parts, right? Now, I can definitely see it being a little warm, a little humid in here, but nothing too crazy, right? As for all the stages, 1, 2, and 3, they're not too much different, right? When I'm playing enclosure, I really don't, notice when the stages change, right? It has computers, right? Lush tropical jungles, and pretty big, indoor habitats, right? So it, as it would have a huge amount of space for you to live in, right? And just as I said, skate, bike, climb, whatever, right? That would be like pretty awesome, right? And that's why I think it deserves spot 4. Now for number 3, I think Swiftwater. Swiftwater, again, is a payload map, meaning it's pretty humongous. It has huge amounts of open land, which is always a positive, right? Assuming you could build stuff in this map if it were in real life. You could build, I don't know, an entire another house in the plenty of free space in here. There's also lots of trees, which are good. I mean, you can climb trees like a monkey pyro. Pretty fun. Has very little water, right? But I'm assuming it's just a clogged pipe, right? So, you could fill up the river or whatever it's called with water, right? Has tons of space, like I said, but also tons of inside space. Some elevation differences, which is good, right? Even has this quote-unquote underground place, right? The tunnel, right? Which would be fun, for example, if it would be a sunny, summer day, right? Too hot to be outside, but you don't want to be inside all day. You could go into cave, it would be fun there, right? And not too much, it has some paved roads too, or not paved, but like proper roads, right? So yeah, deserves spot 4. So, second best map to live in, I would say Embargo. It's straight out of a 1960s spy movie. Amazing art style. It does not have too much open space, but the open space it does have is really good, right? It has a fucking helicopter pad on it near the blue spawn, at the start. Most of the map is inside, but the outside areas have lots of houses, which are good because in this map you could open the doors, so you would have a bunch of houses all to yourself, right? There's bars with infinite drinks, right? The robots that give you the drinks and whatnot, right? Actual music, and again the helicopter pad, so you could leave this because it is on the island. But you also have an entire goddamn casino in it. Basically just luxury urban living, right? Chandeliers everywhere. A full ass city to yourself, right? Kind of feels alive, even if you would be alone in here. So that definitely deserves top 2. And now for the top 1. I really didn't know if I should pick this as top 1 or top 2. It was really tight, but I ended up picking up Applejack. Applejack might be pretty lame in the game, but to live in, number 1, I think it's the biggest CTF map in the entire game, which is really good, right? Has tons of space that's used and tons of unused space. Apple trees, functional barns, and a bunch of chickens and farm animals. And it has a really warm, like, home aesthetic. You're just living in a massive farm, right? It's quiet, It's not really near anything if it would be like in the world that we live in. But it's also like spacious enough to feel like a actual community, like rather than a combat zone, right? It's pretty close to a normal life, that you could find in TF2 universe, right? So, pretty amazing map to live in, right? You could, there's infinite possibilities. There's just so many rooms in it, right? So, definitely top 1.